Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, An Invitation to Elmstone. Hercule Poirot had always believed that a man of advanced years deserved serenity, order, and a properly arranged schedule. It was therefore with a faint sigh, half irritation, half curiosity, that he found himself once again on a train rattling toward the English countryside, summoned by a plea that bore every mark of desperation. The letter arrived 3 days earlier, written in a hand that shook as though its writer feared even the act of committing ink to paper. Monsieur Poirot, I beg of you to come to Elmstone Manor at once. A matter of grave importance threatens not only my family's reputation but our very safety. I do not know whom to trust. I fear that if you do not come, disaster shall follow. Lady Constance Harbury. Poirot, though retired in theory, found such appeals difficult to ignore. As he often said to his friend Hastings, when a woman writes with true fear in her penmanship, mon ami, the detective has no choice but to attend. And so, his orderly holiday plans were abandoned. By the time he reached Elmstone Station, a thin mist had begun to roll over the fields. A black motorcar waited for him, driven by a solemn-faced chauffeur who spoke no more than 3 words during the journey. Elmstone Manor revealed itself slowly, as though reluctant to step forward from the haze. The building was ancient yet serene, standing dignified among winter-bare trees. Its many windows reflected the pale afternoon light like watchful eyes. Along the long gravel drive, Poirot noted the banners hung in preparation for what he later learned was the celebrated Elmstone Lantern Festival, a tradition older even than the manor itself. He was greeted at the entrance by Lady Constance Harbury, a tall woman with a regal presence, though her complexion was wan and her lips pressed tightly together, betraying fatigue and underlying fear. She extended a gloved hand. Monsieur Poirot. Thank you for coming at such short notice. Poirot bowed gently. Madam, when one receives so heartfelt a plea, one cannot remain indifferent. You spoke of danger and uncertainty. Yes, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder before continuing. Please, step inside. We must speak privately. The entrance hall was vast, decorated with portraits of Harbury ancestors. Poirot was immediately struck by the atmosphere, not quite gloom, but a tension that hung in the air like the final note of a discordant chord. Lady Constance led him into a smaller sitting room. Only when the door was firmly closed did she allow herself to sink into a chair. Monsieur Poirot, a terrible thing has happened. The Harbury lantern has been stolen. Poirot straightened slightly. Stolen? This ceremonial lamp you speak of, what is its significance? It is the symbol of our family, she said. For centuries, the lantern has been lit during the festival to mark our ancestors' pledge to truth and honor. It is priceless to us. 2 nights ago, it vanished without a trace. And in its place, she opened a small envelope and handed him a single slip of paper. Poirot read aloud, "Let the truth burn brighter than this false light." He studied the message carefully. The handwriting was bold, deliberate. Not scribbled in haste, but prepared. A statement. A challenge. This is no ordinary theft, madam. Someone wishes to make a point. She nodded with visible distress. That is why I begged you to come. I am convinced the culprit is someone within the household. But I do not know who or why. Poirot coaxed her to recount every detail. The lantern had been kept in a locked display case in a small chamber adjoining the library. The lock was untouched. No windows forced. No sign of tampering. Poirot rubbed his moustache thoughtfully. A theft accomplished without force suggests that the thief possesses either access or trust, yes? Someone familiar with the house. Lady Constance exhaled shakily. I dread that you are correct. Poirot, ever methodical, requested a list of those present in the manor during the night of the disappearance. She provided the names. Edward Harbury, her nephew, charming but troubled, she said softly. Dr. Julia Selwyn, the family physician. A dear friend, though sometimes too protective of me. Miles Partridge, a hired historian researching the lantern's origins. Elsie Brooke, a maid with years of loyal service. Poirot listened without interruption, committing each detail to memory. Madam, he asked gently, is there any reason you fear these particular individuals might wish to harm the family or disrupt this festival? Lady Constance bit her lip. There have been tensions underneath the surface. Family matters. Old disagreements. I would rather not speak hastily. Poirot gave a soft smile. Fear not. We shall proceed with the method, the order, the clarity. For the moment, I require only facts. He asked to see the display room. Lady Constance guided him there herself, walking briskly through dimly lit corridors. The chamber was small but beautifully arranged. A velvet-lined pedestal stood beneath a glass case that should have held the lantern in pride of place. Instead, it was shockingly empty. Poirot approached the case, studying the lock. Pristine, he murmured. Not forced. Not picked. Either the thief had the key or they found another method of opening without leaving marks. Lady Constance swallowed. Only I hold a key. The spare has been missing for years. Poirot's brows lifted. Madam. Missing is a word that interests me greatly. She looked startled but said nothing more. Poirot inspected the floor. No scratches. No footprints in the thin layer of dust near the skirting. But something caught his attention, a faint smell of lantern oil, lingering though the lamp itself was absent. He filed away the detail. Turning back to Lady Constance, Poirot nodded slowly. Madam, you were right to call me. This is no simple disappearance. Something more is concealed beneath this act, something old, perhaps, and more dangerous than stolen property. She trembled. You believe matters are that grave? Poirot gave a small, solemn bow. I believe, Lady Constance, that someone wishes the truth to burn brighter indeed. But whether that truth concerns history, inheritance, or private grievances, we shall discover. As they left the room, Poirot cast one last look at the empty pedestal. In his sharp grey eyes, the first spark of deduction glimmered. Now, he said softly to himself as he walked, let us meet the household. Chapter 2, Shadows in the Manor. Elmstone Manor was a place of long corridors, muted colours, and polished silence. As Hercule Poirot followed Lady Constance through its halls, he became aware of a subtle unease, as though the walls themselves held their breath. A case of theft, yes, but also a case of tension, history, and whispered secrets. Lady Constance paused before a door near the library. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly, this is where the lantern was displayed. I know you have already seen the room, but perhaps the household should meet you here. It is central, and neutral. Poirot inclined his head. As you wish, madam. The presence of the others will help illuminate the shadows, n'est-ce pas? She sent for the household, and one by one they arrived. Edward Harbury. The first to enter was Edward Harbury, Lady Constance's nephew. He was in his late 20s, sharply dressed, with an easy smile that seemed ever so slightly forced. His hair was meticulously parted, but his eyes were restless, darting from Poirot to the empty display case and back again. So, you are the famous Hercule Poirot, he said lightly. I had hoped my aunt was exaggerating, but I suppose a missing heirloom warrants a detective. Poirot responded with a polite nod. Monsieur, it is not exaggeration but need that brings me here. You were present in the manor on the night the lantern disappeared, yes? Edward cleared his throat. Of course. We all were. The weather was ghastly, no one would have ventured out. Poirot observed the faint bruise on Edward's wrist, something Edward instinctively tried to hide when he realized Poirot had noticed. Curious. Dr. Julia Selwyn. Dr. Julia Selwyn entered next. A composed woman in her 40s, she carried herself with the calm precision of a professional accustomed to crises. Her dark hair was tied neatly at the nape of her neck, and a slight weariness rested behind her steady eyes. Monsieur Poirot, she greeted. I trust Lady Constance has informed you of the situation. She has told me enough to begin, Poirot replied. I will have questions for you later, of course. Then I shall answer them as best as I am able, she said simply, folding her hands. Poirot noticed that she, too, glanced quickly toward the empty pedestal, less with fear than with something that seemed almost regret. Elsie Brooke. Then came Elsie Brooke, the senior maid. Short, sturdy, her grey hair pinned tightly beneath a starched cap, she bobbed an awkward curtsy before speaking. Lady Constance said you wanted us all here, sir. I'll help however I can, though I don't know anything about stolen lanterns. I've enough trouble keeping the silver polished. Poirot smiled gently. Your honesty is refreshing. But even the smallest observation can become a clue. Elsie hesitated. Well, I did see someone in the corridor that night. I don't know who. It was only a silhouette. And the manor dog, Bruno, he wouldn't stop howling. Poirot immediately fixed his attention on her. A silhouette? Describe it, if you please. She wrung her hands. Tallish, I think. Certainly not Lady Constance. Could have been any of the others. Was it near this room? Yes, sir. Close enough that I thought someone might be checking the locks. Poirot nodded slowly. Merci, Mademoiselle Brooke. Your observation is most helpful. Miles Partridge. The last to join them was Miles Partridge, the historian. A thin, scholarly man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, he carried a stack of notes under one arm. Ink smudged his fingertips, and his clothes bore the disarray common to those who forget the existence of dust, food, and time when research occupies their minds. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, he said breathlessly, I apologize for the delay. I was reviewing some of the Harbury archives. Terribly exciting documents. Tragic about the lantern, of course, though historically fascinating. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Fascinating? How so? Miles flushed. Well, the lantern is said to contain a hidden compartment. A legend, naturally, but... Lady Constance cut in, sharply. Mr. Partridge, the lantern is not a toy for speculation. Its value is symbolic. Miles opened his mouth to retort, then seemed to think better of it. Yes, Lady Constance. My apologies. Poirot stored that interaction away. A historian fascinated by the object. A family matriarch with anxieties about its symbolism. Interesting. When they were all assembled, Poirot stood before the empty display, his hands lightly clasped behind him. Mesdames and Messieurs, he began, a theft has occurred in this house. But the manner of its occurrence raises questions. The lock was untouched. The window undisturbed. The lantern simply vanished. He paused, letting the silence settle. In such a case, one must consider not only opportunity but motive. And motives are often more numerous than the suspects themselves. Edward spoke first, a hint of sarcasm edging his tone. Are you saying one of us stole it, Monsieur Poirot? You make it sound awfully dramatic. Poirot smiled mildly. The drama, monsieur, is in the situation itself. I merely observe." He turned and walked slowly toward the window, his eyes following the faintest trace of smudging on the sill, not from intrusion, but from someone touching it recently. A nervous gesture? A habitual one? Or something else? Poirot filed the thought away. Poirot begins his inquiry. He returned to the group. "Now, I ask each of you, where were you during the night 2 evenings past, between 9 and midnight?" Lady Constance looked anxious. "Is this necessary?" "Madam," Poirot replied softly, "in such matters, precision is essential." And so the accounts began. Edward claimed he had been in his room reading, no one could confirm it. Dr. Selwyn said she had attended Lady Constance, who had suffered from a restless night. Elsie reported she had been downstairs finishing chores, until she saw the silhouette. Miles insisted he had worked late in the library, reviewing estate documents. None of the alibis overlapped convincingly. None were absolute. Poirot thanked them all. "I will speak with each of you individually. But for now, allow me a moment alone." Reluctantly, the group dispersed. Alone with the room. The moment the door closed, Poirot's face shifted, curiosity sharpening into razor-edged focus. He crouched slightly, inspecting the floor, the legs of the display case, the skirting boards. He whispered to himself, a habit long formed. Not a theft for money. Not a theft of opportunity. A theft with meaning and message. His fingertips brushed a nearly invisible speck of gold dust, caught in the groove of the pedestal's base. He held it up to the light, smiling faintly. Ah! A clue overlooked. The dust of the lantern's decoration. Someone handled it here, hastily, perhaps. He stood. And the smell of lantern oil remains. Subtle, but unmistakable. Poirot stepped back, hands on his hips. A silhouette in the corridor. A historian too eager. A doctor too calm. A nephew too nervous. A maid too certain. He tapped his temple lightly. Already, the threads begin to form. He left the chamber, the faint gleam of a new theory already stirring behind his eyes. Chapter 3, Edward's Uneasy Charm. Edward Harbury's private sitting room occupied a pleasant corner of Elmstone Manor, overlooking the frost-silvered gardens. When Lady Constance informed him that Hercule Poirot wished to speak with him alone, Edward had agreed with apparent good humour. Yet when Poirot arrived at the doorway, he saw the young man nervously straightening papers that did not need straightening, smoothing hair that was already immaculate, and adjusting the cufflinks on his perfectly tailored shirt. It was not the fidgeting itself that caught Poirot's attention, it was the speed with which Edward ceased the motions once he noticed his guest. The smile he offered was too bright, the tone too light. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," Edward said, waving him in with a flourish. "I imagine my aunt is convinced I've stolen the wretched lantern. She has always had a talent for melodrama." Poirot gave a small, polite bow as he entered. "Madam, your aunt is disturbed, frightened even. She seeks clarity, not accusations." Edward laughed. "Clarity in this house? You are an optimist." Poirot took in the room, expensive cigars on a side table, a leather-bound novel left open face down, a glass of brandy untouched but close enough to suggest it had offered comfort earlier in the day. Against the far wall, a small writing desk bore signs of recent use. One drawer was slightly ajar. Poirot gestured toward it. "You have been working this morning." Edward glanced at the drawer and shut it quickly. "Just correspondence, nothing of importance." Poirot merely inclined his head. "I see. A polished exterior, frayed at the edges." "Please sit," Edward said, taking the armchair opposite. "You want to talk about the lantern, no doubt." "Everyone does." It has caused more fuss in 2 days than I've seen in years. Poirot seated himself gracefully. Your aunt spoke of your debts. A difficult matter, no. Edward stiffened almost imperceptibly before forcing a nonchalant shrug. I may have a few financial challenges. Most young men do. London is horrendously expensive. And how do you intend to solve these challenges? Edward flashed a charming grin. Work, Monsieur Poirot. I am, if all goes well, on the verge of an opportunity. Poirot studied him carefully. And the lantern? If it were sold, it would relieve your difficulties entirely. True, Edward conceded, leaning back, but selling a harrowing family relic is hardly my style. And if I wanted the thing gone, do you think I'd leave a cryptic note as well? That's the work of someone with a flair for theatre, not me. Perhaps, Poirot replied. But desperate men can surprise even themselves. Edward's smile faltered. A trace of ash. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his eyes drifting to the corner near the fireplace. The rug bore the faintest dusting of ash, so thin as to be invisible unless one were the sort who noticed what others did not. Have you been burning papers, monsieur? Poirot asked casually. Edward followed his gaze. Oh. That. Just old letters and drafts. Things that don't matter anymore. And yet, Poirot said softly, you burned them recently. The ash is fresh. Edward's face tightened. What of it? Must every action be interpreted as part of some conspiracy? Poirot raised a calming hand. No, no. But you must forgive the investigator his curiosity. Burning papers often suggests a desire to erase something. Edward stood abruptly and crossed to the fireplace, brushing the ash with his foot. If you must know, they were letters from certain unpleasant individuals in London. Debtors. Demands. You understand. Poirot's eyes glinted. Naturally. And one more question, if you will indulge me, the smell of lantern oil that clings faintly to your jacket, how does one explain that? Edward froze. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he laughed awkwardly. You have quite the nose, Monsieur Poirot. I was helping the gardener earlier. He uses lanterns in one of the storage sheds. That must be it. Poirot nodded gracefully. Perhaps. But Edward's explanation came too quickly. Too easily. A scratch on the wrist. Poirot shifted his attention to Edward's left wrist. Beneath the cuff of his shirt, a thin red scratch peeked out, fresh, sharp, and not the result of ordinary clumsiness. He gestured lightly. You have injured yourself. Edward tugged down his sleeve. A thorn in the rose garden. Nothing remarkable. Ah, Poirot murmured. But the roses are dormant this time of year. They have no thorns exposed. Edward's expression hardened. Must every detail be cross-examined? It is my profession, monsieur. Then your profession must be exhausting. Poirot offered a gentle smile. Not at all. It is invigorating. Revealing the mask. Edward sighed and slumped into the armchair again. Look, Poirot, I know how it appears. I truly do. A young man with debts, a valuable object missing, a convenient opportunity. But I didn't take the lantern. Poirot watched him with patient eyes. Then tell me what troubles you. Edward hesitated. Something flickered behind his eyes, fear, perhaps, or guilt of a different variety. I don't know, he said finally. Something is wrong here. I've sensed it for weeks. My aunt has been increasingly anxious. The historian keeps prying into things she'd rather not discuss. Dr. Selwyn insists she's fine but watches her constantly. And the staff, he rubbed his temples. There's tension everywhere. The lantern was only the spark. Poirot's interest sharpened. You believe the theft is only part of a larger matter? Yes, Edward whispered. But I can't tell you what. Because I don't know myself. He looked up suddenly, meeting Poirot's gaze with startling clarity. But whoever took that lantern, whoever wrote that note, they're not trying to steal from the family. They're trying to expose something. Poirot felt the statement land like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Expose what, Monsieur Harbury? Edward shook his head. If I knew that, I might sleep at night. A small, telling detail. Poirot stood. Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful. Helpful? Edward gave a hollow laugh. I've done nothing but look suspicious. No, Poirot said softly. Suspicion is a cloud. And clouds, monsieur, drift with the wind. But the truth, it remains fixed. He reached the door, then paused. His eyes drifted once more to the writing desk. Just as Poirot had suspected earlier, a faint smear of gold dust clung to the edge of the drawer, nearly invisible except under direct light. Gold dust identical to that used in the delicate gilding of the Harbury lantern. Poirot made no mention of it. Not yet. Instead, he merely bowed. Good day, Monsieur Harbury. We shall speak again. As Poirot stepped back into the corridor, he allowed himself a small sigh. Edward Harbury was either a troubled young man caught in events he did not fully grasp, or he was far more involved than he wished to appear. Either way, Poirot knew this. Edward Harbury was hiding something. And Poirot would discover what it was. Chapter 4: Shadows in the Attic. The following morning dawned grey and subdued, with Winterfell Lodge resting under a blanket of low clouds. Snow threatened once more, hanging heavy and silent in the air, as if nature itself held its breath. Hercule Poirot, however, was already awake, immaculately dressed, and enjoying a modest breakfast of toast, fruit, and perfectly prepared tea in the manor's dining room. He was thinking deeply. Lady Evelyn sat opposite him, pale and tense, though she made an admirable effort to appear composed. I barely slept, Monsieur Poirot, she confessed. Not with all of this uncertainty. The police in and out, officers knocking at every door, asking questions. It all feels unreal. Poirot lifted a single eyebrow. The presence of the police, madam, is most necessary. But I understand, it adds to the unease. Yet let us be thankful that Inspector Graves is a man of method. Lady Evelyn folded her hands. I wish I shared your confidence. Before Poirot could reply, Clara Whitcomb appeared at the doorway, her expression unsettled. Her usually brisk manner was absent. Monsieur Poirot. Lady Evelyn, there is something you should see. Poirot finished his tea with deliberate calm. Lead the way, mademoiselle. Clara guided them through a narrow staircase at the back of the west wing, one Poirot had not yet explored. The walls here were colder, the air tinged with the faint smell of dust and age. A single lantern flickered on the wall, struggling feebly against the gloom. I came to fetch one of the old inventory ledgers, Clara explained, breath slightly quick. I needed to check some of the household accounts from last month. I went to the attic archives and found, well, you must see it for yourself. The attic door creaked loudly as Clara pushed it open. Poirot stepped inside, pausing at once. Dust motes drifted lazily through the filtered light. Old trunks, crates, and rolled carpets were piled neatly along the walls. But it was not the clutter that arrested his attention. It was the footprints, fresh, clearly stamped into the dusty wooden floorboards, leading in a wavering line from the entrance to the far corner of the room. Poirot approached them slowly. Mon Dieu, he murmured softly. Someone has been here. Quite recently. Lady Evelyn wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders. But who? No one comes up to this attic. The servants barely set foot here. Clara swallowed. Not only that. Look! She pointed towards a set of old storage cabinets at the room's far end. One of the drawers, usually kept locked, now hung partially open. Poirot crouched carefully, examining the lock with his magnifying glass. Forced, he said. A rather crude attempt. Someone desperate, perhaps, not skilled, but determined. Inside the open drawer lay a disordered stack of papers, stamped legal documents, correspondences, and old receipts. Poirot rifled through them delicately until Clara gasped, drawing his attention. "What is it, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked. Clara held up a thin envelope. This should not be here. It's one of the restricted papers Sir Archibald kept apart from the rest. She turned it over, revealing a broken wax seal. It was sealed when I last saw it. Poirot accepted the envelope, opening it with care. Inside were two items, a faded photograph and a short letter, handwritten and unsigned. The photograph showed Sir Archibald as a younger man, standing beside a woman with striking eyes. Their posture, though subtle, conveyed intimacy. On the back of the photograph were the initials, E.W. Poirot's eyes narrowed a fraction. Lady Evelyn leaned over his shoulder. Who is that woman?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He studied the photo again, then unfolded the letter. The note consisted of only one sentence. "If the truth is ever revealed, everything you possess will crumble." Lady Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Poirot stood, tucking the letter back into its envelope. "This, I think, is of great significance. But tell me, Lady Evelyn, does the name represented by these initials, E.W., mean anything to you?" She shook her head, bewildered. "I have no idea. If she were anyone connected to my late husband's past, he never mentioned her." Poirot gave her a long, thoughtful look, gentle, but penetrating. "People, madam, often keep their secrets buried. Until, of course, someone decides to unearth them." Clara stepped backwards uneasily. "Do you think Sir Archibald's death is connected to this?" Poirot responded in his usual calm manner. "It is far too early to say. But what is certain is that someone came here in the night, or the early morning, to find this very drawer. Someone who either knew or suspected what lay within." He pointed at the footprints. "And these, I believe, will be most helpful." Lady Evelyn swallowed. "You think you can identify them?" Poirot gave a faint smile. "Mais oui. One must only observe." He knelt again, studying the shoe size, the tread pattern, the depth of the impression. His eyes glimmered with sharp interest. "These footprints belong to a man," Poirot said after a moment. "The size is too large for a woman." He walked with a slight inward turn of the left foot. "And he moved quickly, see here? The forward pressure is greater. He was searching for something with urgency." "Who could it be?" Clara asked. Poirot did not answer. Instead, he walked to the attic window. The frost on the lower glass had been wiped away, just enough for someone to peer out, or perhaps look for watchers below. "Curious," he said softly. When they descended from the attic, Poirot was unusually quiet. Lady Evelyn caught his arm. "Monsieur Poirot, you are troubled." "I am thoughtful, madam." "There is much to consider," he replied. "And I would like to speak to each member of the household again, more thoroughly, more precisely." Clara nodded. "Shall I gather them?" "In a moment," Poirot said. "First, I must verify a small suspicion." Clara blinked. Regarding whom? The one who wears such shoes, Poirot said, and whose conscience, perhaps, is not so light. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Inspector Graves strode into the hallway, holding a report in his hand. Poirot. Just the man. I've had a look at last night's statements. There are inconsistencies, small, but present. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Excellent. Then with your assistance, Inspector, we may yet illuminate the shadows in this house. He paused, lowering his voice. For in the attic, we have discovered something quite revealing. And I believe, mon ami, that the secrets of Winterfell Lodge are beginning to stir. Chapter 5, Suspicions and Confessions. A quiet tension settled upon Winterfell Lodge that afternoon, chilling the air more effectively than the gathering snow. Poirot, standing in the drawing-room with Inspector Graves, waited calmly as Clara fetched the household members one by one. He stood by the large window, observing the drive where grey flakes drifted lazily, as if they feared to land. Your calm amazes me, Inspector Graves muttered. A man's been murdered, secrets uncovered, and you look as though you're waiting for a train. Poirot smoothed his moustache. Patience, mon ami, is the ally of truth. We must allow the suspects to reveal themselves, not always with their words, but with their reactions. The inspector sighed, though he'd long accepted that Poirot's methods, no matter how unorthodox, tended to yield results. The first to enter was Mr. Edmund Blackwood, Sir Archibald's solicitor. A tall, bony man with a face that always seemed caught between irritation and worry, he removed his gloves stiffly. You wanted to speak with me again, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot gestured to a chair. Please sit, monsieur. There are but a few small matters requiring clarification. Blackwood's frown deepened. Very well. Poirot folded his hands behind his back. Last night, monsieur, you claimed you retired early. At what hour precisely? A little after 10, Blackwood replied. I was tired. The events of the evening had been quite distressing. Poirot studied him. And did you leave your room at any time afterwards? Blackwood shifted. No. Poirot stepped closer. Are you certain, monsieur? You were not perhaps in the west wing? Or the attic? Blackwood blinked rapidly. What? Absolutely not. Why would I go there? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he observed Blackwood's shoes, polished, pointed, and standard in cut. But the tread pattern was noticeably similar to what he had seen in the attic. Blackwood followed Poirot's gaze and stiffened. Surely you don't believe I? That is absurd. Poirot raised a hand gently. Calm yourself, monsieur. I merely observe. Inspector Graves stepped in. And we'll be checking everyone's footwear. Standard procedure. Blackwood paled. This is outrageous. I came here to help Lady Evelyn settle the estate affairs, not to be interrogated like a criminal. Poirot inclined his head. Then you have nothing to fear, monsieur. But as Blackwood left, Poirot murmured to the inspector, he is frightened. But fear alone does not make one guilty. It may make one careless, however. The next to enter was Colin Marbury, the valet. He moved with the same quiet precision as before, though there was a faint stiffness around his eyes. You wish to see me again, sir? Poirot gestured for him to approach. Oh, I. Tell me, Monsieur Marbury, you were responsible for Sir Archibald's personal effects. Yes, sir. And you knew the layout of the house, every staircase, every passage, every room. Yes, sir, Marbury said. It is my duty. Poirot leaned slightly forward. Then tell me, why did you not mention the west wing staircase in your initial account? You passed by it before retiring to your quarters. Did you not? Marbury hesitated. I may have forgotten to mention it, sir. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Forgotten? Or preferred not to mention it? Marbury swallowed. Does it matter? It matters very much, Poirot said softly. Because someone ascended that staircase last night. Someone who walked with haste. The valet's eyes flickered. I did go upstairs, he admitted quickly. But only for a moment. I thought I heard footsteps and wanted to ensure no intruder had entered the house. Inspector Graves frowned. Why didn't you say that earlier? Marbury licked his lips. Because I feared it would place suspicion upon me. And I assure you, I found nothing and returned to my room straight away. Poirot studied him silently for a long moment. Marbury fidgeted. You may go, Poirot finally said. But remain available. The valet hurried out, shoulders tight. Graves watched him leave. He's hiding something. Poirot nodded slowly. Oh, but what he hides may not be the murder. The third to enter was Lady Evelyn, wrapped in a deep green shawl that emphasized her pallor. Poirot, must we continue this dreadful questioning? The atmosphere in the house is unbearable. Poirot offered a sympathetic smile. Courage, madam. These are necessary steps. Now, a small matter, are you familiar with any woman bearing the initials E.W.? Lady Evelyn's eyes widened with genuine surprise. No. I racked my mind all evening after you showed me the photograph. Whoever she is? Archibald never spoke of her. Poirot tilted his head. You are certain? Absolutely. Poirot observed her closely, her voice steady, her hands trembling ever so slightly. He did not sense deceit. Très bien, Lady Evelyn. One more question, if you please. Last night, did you leave your room at any moment? No, she said firmly. I could hardly move from the shock. I only wish I had gone to him sooner. Poirot nodded gently and allowed her to leave. Graves folded his arms. She seems truthful. To an extent, Poirot replied. But truth, Inspector, is like a tapestry. One must examine not only the threads but also the empty spaces between them. The next to enter was Clara Whitcomb. She approached nervously, hands clasped tightly. Poirot, before you begin, I must tell you something. Ah, Poirot murmured. A confession? Do proceed. Clara took a steadying breath. Last night, before everything happened, I overheard Sir Archibald arguing on the telephone. His voice carried down the corridor. He sounded frightened. Graves leaned forward. Did you hear what he said? Only fragments, Clara replied. Something about not letting it happen again, and keeping someone away. Poirot's eyes brightened with interest. Did he mention a name, mademoiselle? No, Clara said. But he repeated the phrase you promised me several times. Poirot tapped his fingertips together. Most intriguing. And why did you not tell us this earlier? Clara lowered her eyes. I thought it didn't matter. I thought I'd misheard. And, well, I didn't want to complicate things for Lady Evelyn. Poirot's expression softened. Loyalty is admirable, mademoiselle. But in matters of murder, it can be dangerous. Clara nodded miserably. You have done well now, Poirot said. You may go. When Clara left, Graves let out a long breath. Well, that's something. Poirot walked slowly towards the fireplace, staring into the embers. It is more than something, Inspector. It is a thread. And when pulled, I believe it will unravel much. Graves stepped forward. So who do you suspect? Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming. I suspect, mon ami, that all is not as it seems. The motives lie not in the present, but in the past. And somewhere in that past, the shadow of EW waits to be uncovered. He paused. And when she steps into the light, so too will the truth of Sir Archibald's death. Chapter 6, The Woman in the Photograph. The storm broke later that evening. Snow lashed fiercely against the tall windows of Winterfell Lodge, turning the world beyond into a swirling white blur. The house felt smaller, more enclosed. Footsteps echoed louder, whispers carried farther, and every creak of the old structure seemed amplified. In the library, Poirot stood by a grand oak desk, examining the photograph once more under the warm glow of a lamp. The mysterious woman stared back at him with calm eyes, eyes that hinted at stories unspoken, secrets held close. Her posture beside Sir Archibald suggested neither mere acquaintance nor formal familiarity. It was, Poirot thought, the posture of someone who once believed they mattered. Inspector Graves entered abruptly, brushing snow from his shoulders. This storm is a devil. Roads are nearly impassable. No one's getting in or out until morning. Poirot smiled faintly. Then we are all prisoners here, mon ami. A most charming situation for the murderer. Graves grumbled. Well, it means no one can run. Or, Poirot replied softly, it means they panic. Before the inspector could respond, Lady Evelyn rushed in. Her shawl fluttered like a distressed banner. Monsieur Poirot, please come quickly. Colin, he's acting very strangely. Poirot and Graves followed her to the downstairs study. Colin Marbury, the valet, sat slumped in a chair, shaking. His eyes were unfocused, fixed on the floor, while his hands gripped the armrests tightly. Marbury, Graves barked. What's the matter with you? Colin swallowed, his voice thin. I need to confess something. Poirot exchanged a quiet look with the inspector, then approached the trembling man with measured calm. Take a breath, Monsieur Marbury. Begin at the beginning. The valet nodded, though his legs trembled. Last night, I went into Sir Archibald's study. Before dinner. He had called me earlier, asking me to fetch a sealed box from the safe. I didn't manage to bring it to him before he died. Poirot's moustache lifted. A sealed box. Yes, Marbury whispered. He said it contained something valuable. But when I opened the safe, the box was gone. Inspector Graves straightened sharply. Gone? Stolen? Marbury nodded. I panicked. I didn't want Sir Archibald to think I'd misplaced it. I searched the room, the corridor. I even checked the West Wing study. But I never found it. Poirot leaned a little closer. And you did not mention this earlier because? Marbury looked helpless. Because it makes me look guilty. The missing box, the noise I heard upstairs. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Poirot studied him with gentle scrutiny. And what, monsieur, do you believe was inside this box? I don't know, Marbury said. But Sir Archibald was terrified about it. Shaken. I've never seen him like that. Lady Evelyn gasped. Why didn't he tell me? Poirot turned to her gently. Because, madam, husbands sometimes fear burdening their wives with truths that may change how they are seen. Lady Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. Graves crossed his arms. So the box is missing. And Sir Archibald is dead. And you, Marbury, were the last to know about it. Marbury bowed his head. Yes. Poirot circled the room slowly. Tell me, Monsieur Marbury, did you know of the woman whose photograph I now possess? Marbury's head snapped up. The woman with Sir Archibald? Yes. I recognized her. All eyes widened. Who is she? Lady Evelyn whispered, her voice fragile. Marbury hesitated. Then, her name was Eleanor Whitcomb. A chilling silence fell. Poirot blinked. Whitcomb. Clara Whitcomb, who had slipped into the room unnoticed, froze. That's impossible, she whispered. My mother died when I was a child. I never knew she had met Sir Archibald. Poirot turned the photograph toward her. Clara stepped back as if struck. This is my mother. I'm certain. Lady Evelyn looked faintly ill. Archibald knew her. Marbury nodded miserably. They were close. Very close. Before Lady Evelyn met him. Poirot raised a hand. Then tell us, monsieur, why does Lady Evelyn know nothing of her husband's past connection to this woman? Because Sir Archibald ended it long before he married Lady Evelyn, Marbury said. At least, that's what he told me years ago. He said it was a youthful mistake. Clara's face was pale, tight with shock. My mother never spoke of him. Poirot gave her a sympathetic nod. Grief sometimes closes the heart to memories, mademoiselle. Inspector Graves paced. So EW is Eleanor Whitcomb. Which means the threatening letter. Clara cut him off, voice shaking. My mother would never threaten anyone. She wasn't that sort of person. Poirot lifted the letter from his pocket. Yet perhaps she did not write it. The handwriting is disguised. But the message speaks of danger. Of a truth that could crumble everything. Lady Evelyn sank into a chair. Archibald, oh heavens! Poirot placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Courage, madam. I do not yet believe the past affair is the heart of the matter. But someone wished it to appear so. He turned to Marbury. One question, did Sir Archibald speak of Eleanor recently? Marbury wiped his brow. Only once. Last week. He asked if Clara knew anything of her mother's old papers. I told him no. Poirot's eyes glittered. And how did he react? He seemed relieved. As if he hoped she did not. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, mind racing. Then, Inspector Graves, we have a new dimension to our mystery. A missing box. A hidden relationship. A threatened truth. And a connection between Sir Archibald and the mother of his secretary. Clara swallowed hard. What are you suggesting, Monsieur Poirot? Poirot turned to the window where snow battered the glass. I suggest nothing. But I observe, mademoiselle, that you worked for Sir Archibald because he insisted on hiring you. Clara blinked. Yes. I thought it was kindness. Poirot shook his head gently. None. It was guilt. A guilt Sir Archibald carried for many years. Silence hung in the room like a suspended blade. At last, Graves spoke. Poirot, this changes everything. It means Clara had a motive. Clara's breath caught. Inspector! Poirot raised a hand sharply. No. It means only that she is connected to the past. Nothing more. He looked around the room, eyes sweeping over each face. The truth, my friends, draws nearer. But mark my words, the solution lies not only in the past, but in what happened here, under this very roof, in the final days of Sir Archibald's life. He pocketed the photograph. And I intend, before the storm clears, to reveal every secret that Winterfell Lodge hides. Chapter 7, The Final Threads Tighten. Night settled heavily upon Winterfell Lodge, smothering the house in a bleak and oppressive stillness. The storm had not relented. Snow continued to batter the windows with relentless insistence, as though determined to force its way inside. Every corridor felt narrower, every shadow deeper, every silence heavier, with fear, with guilt, with secrets. Poirot, however, seemed entirely untroubled by the elements. He walked the length of the grand hall with measured steps, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes alert and inquisitive. Inspector Graves followed, glancing occasionally at his notebook, though Poirot suspected the poor man wrote more out of habit than necessity now. "You've spoken to them all again," Graves said quietly. "You've seen the attic, the study, the scene of death. Poirot, do you have a theory?" Poirot smiled gently. "A theory, Inspector?" "Mais oui. But theories, like soufflés, must be handled with delicacy. One must let them rise naturally." Graves groaned. "You and your metaphors." Poirot stopped in front of the drawing-room door. "Come, Inspector. Our suspects await us." Inside, Lady Evelyn sat by the fire, hands trembling slightly. Clara Whitcomb stood near the window, staring into the blizzard as though searching for clarity in the white chaos outside. Edmund Blackwood paced restlessly, his shoes clicking sharply against the polished floorboards. Colin Marbury lingered by the mantelpiece, pale and exhausted. Their eyes turned collectively as Poirot entered. "Merci, my friends," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I appreciate your patience. Murder investigations, especially those shrouded in the past, require both time and courage." Blackwood snapped, "Enough pleasantries, Monsieur Poirot. You've kept us all in suspense long enough. If you have something to say, then say it plainly." Poirot regarded him calmly. "Very well, monsieur. I shall speak plainly." He stepped into the center of the room, turning slowly as he spoke. Sir Archibald's death is not an isolated act of violence. It is the final consequence of a long-buried secret. A secret involving Eleanor Whitcomb. Clara flinched. Poirot continued, "Years ago, Sir Archibald formed a close relationship with this woman. Perhaps too close. Something occurred, something with repercussions that haunted him ever since." Lady Evelyn looked down, her voice trembling. "But he ended the affair before we met." "Yes," Poirot said gently. "But he did not end the guilt." Blackwood crossed his arms. "What does this have to do with the murder?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Patience, monsieur. The truth unravels thread by thread." He paced slowly. "Someone discovered this photograph. Someone learned of Eleanor. Someone feared what exposure might bring." Clara's voice shook. "Why would that matter now? My mother is gone." Poirot nodded. "Just so. But secrets do not die with the dead, mademoiselle. And Sir Archibald knew it. The mysterious box he kept in the safe, its disappearance is no coincidence." Marbury swallowed. "Sir, you think someone stole it to blackmail him?" Poirot turned to him. "Perhaps, Monsieur Marbury. But perhaps the contents were never meant to be found at all." Blackwood grew impatient. "Enough riddles, Poirot." Poirot raised a hand. "Very well. Let us examine the motives." He pointed first to Clara. "You, mademoiselle, had the strongest connection to the past. The revelation that Sir Archibald wronged your mother might inspire anger, or fear." Clara recoiled, shaking her head fiercely. "I respected Sir Archibald. I adored Lady Evelyn. I would never harm either of them." Poirot nodded. "Just so. And your emotion, mademoiselle, convinces me." He turned abruptly to Blackwood. "You, monsieur, feared for the estate. A scandal tied to Sir Archibald's past would jeopardize everything: his legacy, Lady Evelyn's reputation. The will you helped prepare. Blackwood stiffened. I acted only in her interests. Of course, Poirot said mildly. But your fear was real. Poirot shifted his gaze to Marbury. You, the valet, knew far more than you admitted. You heard Sir Archibald's late-night telephone arguments. You knew about the sealed box. You roamed the house the night of the murder. Marbury wrung his hands. I was trying to protect him. Poirot paused before Lady Evelyn. And you, madam, stood to lose the most. A scandal, a financial shock, the revelation of a past affair, these could shake even the strongest marriage. But grief, it is clear, has consumed you. Lady Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Poirot, you cannot think. Poirot bowed slightly. None, madam. I do not. There was silence. Poirot straightened. The truth, Miss Amos, is that all of you had motives. Strong ones. But motives alone do not create murderers. Opportunity, however, that is another matter. Graves leaned forward. Go on. Poirot clasped his hands. The killer is someone who entered the study without raising suspicion. Someone who knew the house intimately. Someone who felt cornered by the return of secrets long hidden. He turned to the window, watching the snow fall. In the attic, the footprints belonged to a man. In the study, the papers were shuffled by someone familiar with Sir Archibald's habits. The lock on the drawer was forced by someone with neither skill nor patience. And the missing box, that is the key. He spun around suddenly. The murderer stole the box and killed Sir Archibald not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear that the truth would destroy everything. His eye settled on a single person. Monsieur Edmund Blackwood. Blackwood froze, colour draining from his face. Lady Evelyn gasped. Marbury stepped back in shock. Clara covered her mouth. Graves grabbed Blackwood's arm. Stay where you are. No, this is madness. Blackwood shouted. I had no reason to kill him. Poirot advanced, voice calm and unyielding. But you did, monsieur. For you knew what Sir Archibald feared. You knew what was in the box. You feared exposure, not for him, but for yourself. Blackwood shook his head violently. No. Poirot raised a hand. In the box, Monsieur Blackwood, were the documents linking you to the misappropriation of family funds over many years. Sir Archibald discovered it. He intended to confront you. That is why he called you urgently to the study yesterday afternoon. Blackwood's breath caught. Poirot continued softly. You were desperate. You stole the box. But Sir Archibald found you, confronted you, and in your panic, you struck him. Blackwood's face twisted with despair. Clara whispered, Is it true? Blackwood broke. I didn't mean to kill him, he whispered. He lunged at me. He knew everything. My career, my life, all gone. Graves snapped the handcuffs over his wrists. Poirot watched quietly. As Blackwood was led away, Poirot turned to the others, his voice gentle. We are shaped, Miss Amos, by our fears as much as our hopes. And sometimes, a man will do anything, to keep his world from collapsing. He sighed softly. But murder, I fear, collapses it all the faster. The storm raged on outside. But inside Winterfell Lodge, the storm had finally begun to break. Chapter 8, The Final Gathering at Winterfell Lodge. Morning arrived with a brittle clarity, the kind that follows a night of harsh frost. The snow lay thick across the grounds of Winterfell Lodge, its surface undisturbed except for a lonely set of footprints leading from the house towards the woods, footprints that had appeared shortly before dawn. The household awakened in confusion, servants whispering anxiously in the corridors, and Lady Whitcomb demanding to know why Poirot had requested that every single person remain in the drawing room until further instructions. Poirot himself appeared shortly after 9 o'clock, serene as a man stepping out for a stroll in spring rather than braving a relentless winter. His moustache was meticulously groomed, and his eyes glinted with a brightness that suggested the final pieces of the puzzle were firmly in place. "Miss Amos," he said, rubbing his gloved hands together as if preparing for a fine meal, "it is time. If you would all gather in the library, I shall bring this most curious affair to its conclusion." The group filed in, Lady Whitcomb pale and trembling, Clara nervously twisting a handkerchief, Marcus Holloway with an agitated stiffness, Dr. Caldwell outwardly calm but betraying subtle tension around the eyes, Mrs. Pembroke unsettled but trying to maintain an air of control, Edwin Garrison looking exhausted, Harper Wynne quietly observant as always, and Constable Briggs anxious to hear what Poirot had uncovered. Poirot positioned himself before the hearth, where a low fire glowed with comforting warmth. Behind him, the tall windows revealed the winter landscape, stark and unyielding. He raised a hand for silence. "Last night, I made an important discovery," he began. A discovery that not only clarified the contradictions in everyone's accounts, but illuminated a hidden truth about our victim, Mr. Arthur Penwell. Lady Whitcomb clasped her hands tightly. Is this about the footprints?" "Precisely, milady," Poirot replied. "Footprints which I followed at dawn. They led me to the woods, where I found a small cache, a metal box buried beneath a fallen pine. Inside were documents that Mr. Penwell had sought to hide until the moment was right." He allowed a dramatic pause. "And those documents contained proof of a fraud." A ripple of shock passed through the room. "You see," Poirot continued, "Penwell had for some months been investigating a scheme in which several individuals here were entangled, whether knowingly or not. A scheme involving forged signatures, manipulated land valuations, and the quiet siphoning of funds meant for war widows. Mr. Penwell, a man with a highly inconvenient conscience, intended to expose this deception." Marcus Holloway stood abruptly, color high in his cheeks. "How dare you insinuate?" "Sit down, Monsieur Holloway," Poirot said sharply. "Your indignation is admirable, but unconvincing. It is you who first appeared in the late Mr. Penwell's letters, written in a tone of concern that concealed threats. But you are not the murderer." Marcus blinked, stunned. Poirot turned to the others. "The question, as always, is, who had the most to lose? Who was desperate enough to ensure that Penwell never lived to reveal what he had discovered? And who had both the opportunity and the cunning to direct suspicion toward others?" Clara trembled, her voice a faint murmur. "Monsieur Poirot, please." "Who was it?" Poirot lifted a finger. "Patience, mademoiselle. Let us review. OUI." He began moving across the carpet in small, precise steps. "First, there was the letter summoning me here, written by Penwell, or so it seemed. But the tone did not match his style. It was more theatrical, more urgent. Secondly, the poison in his glass. It was of a type used rarely and with extreme specificity, stored only in one place at the lodge, Dr. Caldwell's medical bag." Dr. Caldwell stiffened. "I explained that my bag was unattended for half an hour, anyone could have taken the vial." "And so they did," Poirot agreed. "But this person also knew how to administer it in a drink without telltale odor. They were clever enough to use Caldwell's own supplies to frame him, yet not reckless enough to handle the poison without protection." Poirot produced a folded cloth from his pocket. "This," he said, opening it to reveal a small, crimson-stained glove, "was burned at the edges and hidden behind the boiler in the cellar. But not well enough. A glove belonging to..." He faced her. Lady Evelyn Whitcomb. A quiet gasp escaped the group. Lady Whitcomb, usually the picture of control, sagged back into her chair like a marionette with its strings severed. "No, no, you misunderstand," she whispered. I was frightened. I made mistakes, but I didn't murder him." Poirot's expression softened only slightly. "You did, milady." And with calculation. Tears welled in her eyes. "He threatened everything, my home, my reputation. He knew things I prayed no one else would uncover." Poirot nodded. "He discovered that you authorized the transfers. You believed he wished to blackmail you. But in truth, he intended only to confront you privately, and then expose the full syndicate, which he had traced back to Holloway, Garrison, and Caldwell." All three visibly recoiled. "You feared penury," Poirot continued gently. "You feared disgrace. And so, when Penwell arrived unexpectedly early on the night of the dinner, you saw your chance. You slipped into Dr. Caldwell's quarters, stole the poison, laced Penwell's wine while he admired the portrait, and returned to your guests as if nothing had happened." Her composure crumbled entirely. "I only meant to frighten him, to stop him. I didn't expect the dose to be so final." Poirot shook his head. "The dose was measured with exactitude. You knew precisely what you were doing." Lady Whitcomb covered her face, sobbing softly. Poirot addressed the others. "As for the rest of you, though your actions were morally questionable, you were not the ones who committed murder. The fraud will, of course, be investigated by the proper authorities." Constable Briggs rose hesitantly. "Monsieur Poirot, what about the footprints? Could they have been hers?" Poirot smiled faintly. "None. Those footprints were made by Mr. Garrison, who attempted to retrieve the buried documents at dawn, and thereby unwittingly led me straight to them." Edwin Garrison flushed deeply. I panicked." "Understandable," Poirot said. "But futile." At last he clasped his hands behind his back, a posture of calm finality. "And there, Miss Amis, you have the whole truth. A web of greed, fear, and deception, unraveled not by violence, but by the smallest inconsistencies. A misplaced letter, a trembling hand, a missing glove. Always, it is the tiny details that betray the lie." Lady Whitcomb was escorted away by Briggs, her sobs echoing down the cold corridor. The room felt strangely hollow once she was gone, as if winter itself had seeped into the walls. Poirot adjusted his tie, casting one final glance at the snow-covered world beyond the window. "Come, my friends," he said softly. "Justice, she is not always kind. But she is always necessary." And with that, Hercule Poirot stepped from the library, his silhouette sharp and dignified against the pale winter light, the unmistakable figure of a man who had once again restored order to a world momentarily overshadowed by darkness.